Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I'm ready to do my full review on this very interesting knife. This is the CRKT Provoke. It is a Caswell Knives design. It is in D2 blade steel with what I believe is an aluminum chassis, and it is a wild ringed karambit that works differently than any other knife I've ever owned, experienced, anything. This knife was loaned to me for review by my good friend at this point, DTOM Knives and Gear. Kyle has become a legitimate friend, and we talk a lot on Instagram, and we've loaned each other quite a few knives at this point, back and forth, and he's been a big supporter of the channel. He's also one of my Patreon patrons, and just a really, really cool dude. He passed 1,000 subscribers not too long ago, as of when I'm filming this, and he's already been crushing it. I think he's like a couple hundred past that now. He will be linked down below. So if you're not already familiar with Kyle, if you're new to me and haven't heard me talk about him yet, I've talked about him many times, but I will continue to because he's a good buddy and I like what he does. So this is his personal CRKT Provoke, and I reached out to him to borrow it because the timing was interesting. I had just borrowed the Emerson CQC7 from John at BGM, and I also had purchased the Microtech Hawk Auto. And because I had kind of a Mall Ninja thing going on, I figured now is the right time to review a ringed tactical karambit, because I never have before. And this one is one of the only karambits that I've ever been really curious about, because I haven't felt like they're super my style or anything like that. And this one's just different enough that it kind of stands on its own, and I was curious about how it worked. If you aren't familiar with the CRKT Provoke, it is a wild mechanism. Basically, there's these two arms that kind of pivot in unison, and the blade folds outward like this, and then locks into place there. Before having this knife in hand, I was very curious how all of these parts would feel ergonomically in hand, but it's actually quite comfortable. So we'll talk about that. And yeah, this is just a karambit that I found was worth checking out, even for me as somebody who's not super into like tactical knives generally, and also is I've never just been into karambits. That's fair to say. I've never wanted one that bad. So there have been a couple of occasions where I almost purchased one of these just purely out of the curiosity. I can now say, very glad that I didn't. It's been fun to check this one out, but I don't want to own one. That shouldn't probably come as all that much of a surprise, because this would have been a stretch for me to get to a point where I really wanted this, but I wanted to feel it out. So I did a bit of a carry challenge with this. I didn't carry it every day for 7 days straight like I do with a lot of my carry challenges, for a couple of reasons. A, I didn't want to. I found out pretty quick, don't like carrying this that much. I have to do it in a very particular way to even be kind of okay with it. On top of that, I've had a lot of gear coming in that I've been trying to cycle into my pockets, partially to get ready to review, and also when I get new gear, I want to carry it, just because I'm excited about it. So there's been a lot of things battling for pocket time right now. But this one, I've made a point to carry. I think realistically, if I'm being conservative in my estimate, I've probably carried this about 7 times, only once for an entire day. And part of that is I've been back at work, and so when I'm working, a lot of the time I'm just in basketball shorts, and then in the evening I'll put on real shorts or jeans, and then I can carry more stuff. But when I'm just in my basketball shorts, this isn't going to be what goes tossed into my pocket. And yeah, I don't know, there's factors to that. Big part of it is I just don't love carrying it. So the way that I found that is most comfortable, frankly, for me to carry this knife is really just to toss it in my back pocket. And I shouldn't say toss it. I do use the clip, which is a very different clip. Basically, there's this spot up here with this little bit of texture. You can see when I pull on that, it lifts that side of the clip up. So when this knife goes front right pocket, you imagine you put it in like this, then to deploy the knife or to get it out of your pocket, I kind of stick my finger in and then just pull upwards this way. What I've found when I do that in my front right pocket, where I usually keep my primary, when I tried it with this, I found that this in a front pocket is not fun. It's really uncomfortable. It's just a big, heavy hunk of weirdness in your pocket. And then there's this big ring sticking out, right? And then when I go to grab it and deploy it, a lot of the time, this spot was catching on my pocket in such a way that I would accidentally, almost like a wave deployment, I would deploy it as I'd pull it out of my pocket, which on a new knife with a new mechanism that I'm not used to and being reverse grip out of the pocket with a ring, it's just kind of a lot to have happening when I'm used to a more regular EDC folder being my primary. So my workaround has been I've put it in my back right pocket. Usually I'll carry a primary front right pocket and I'll carry a secondary back left pocket. This makes more sense to me back right pocket, so I can still get to it with my right hand. Having it back there, I don't run into that issue of this corner catching and deploying, so I don't have like accidental deployments when I draw from there, so I can draw it out and have it and be ready, which is fine, it works. But it's still kind of big and cumbersome, and then I've got this thing sticking out of my back pocket if people happen to see it. It's just kind of weird and different, and if I wanted to, could I get used to it? Yeah, people can get used to anything. I could get used to carrying, I don't know, freaking worry stones and challenge coins everywhere, but I don't want to. I didn't find that I felt more confident in a self-defense situation having this on me than I do with a number of my primary folders that are just more normal knives. So I would say the carry challenge portion of this went poorly. I don't like carrying this knife. I have to do it in that one specific kind of different way. I'm not used to having a knife there a lot of the time. Plus I clip my keys onto that belt loop right there, so I worry about them like battering up against it all the time, and it's just not a spot where I like having a knife. And in my more primary location, it's not that good there either. Where I put my secondary, it's really not good, because then I'm drawing it like freaking this. That's not how I want this knife. That's a hazard. It's just, I didn't love it. So carry challenge, if it's pass or fail, fail, not good. But let's talk about the knife and my experience with it. Bear in mind, as I go into this, I'm not generally a big tactical knives guy, and the likelihood of me liking this going into it was very low to begin with. If you are super into tactical knives, don't hold it against me that I'm not. I'm fine with you being into it. You can be fine with me not being into it. Let's leave that there. So, I am looking at this based on its merits of what I look for in a knife. I'm not looking at it as how good of a self-defense tool is it if you're into martial arts and combatives and all of that kind of stuff, because I don't train in that way. I like the idea, being able to use my knife for self-defense. If I ever come to a situation where I need to, it's good to be prepared for that to a degree, but I don't devote my life to it, and I find that I find way more use out of my knives for my more typical everyday carry usage, and usually tactical knives are not great everyday carry knives in my experience so far. This certainly was not, and I'm going to go through the list of why, but let's start it in that framework. So usually in a knife review, I'll want to talk about a couple of things: ergos, carry, cutting performance, and action are kind of the main things that I go over. Now, I've already talked about carry. Failed that test. Don't really like carrying, so I'm not going to go over that again. I feel like it would be beating a dead horse. But I can talk about the other elements. Ergos I touched on. I'm pleasantly surprised by how not awful these ergos are. This is a differently shaped knife with a lot happening with this mechanism that is all like really an external mechanism. Most folders all of the kind of moving components are sandwiched between some scales. Here, you're holding on to components that move. So the fact that it lines up in such a way that feels somewhat comfortable in my hand is pretty impressive. There's no real hot spots. The biggest gripe I have with the knife ergonomically is that for my hands, maybe you have a finger that's twice as thick as my pointer finger, but for me and my hands, this ring is just way too big, and that makes it uncomfortable because there's just too much room in here. And so, I don't know, I would hate to hit something with this. I feel like really confident actually that my finger would slip and it would hurt my knuckle quite a bit. And then I find just the way that I get a grip on the knife, the ring doesn't fit me right. So I'm not going to say that I'm closed off to trying any other ringed knives, because maybe I'll find one where the ring does fit my hand better and that really enhances it. It's kind of fun to do this kind of stuff, but I don't know. I'm not like super into it. Not a karambit guy. So Ergos are okay, but the ring is the issue for me here. Cutting performance, we can talk about that. So I do, with my typical EDC knives, I'm somebody who puts my knives into a reverse grip probably more frequently than a lot of people do, I'd imagine, because I notice a lot of people tend to not even consider it. And that's fine if they don't use their knives that way, but reverse grip is important to me, and I do put my knives into a reverse grip, sometimes just to make cuts on stuff. I don't know if you can tell by the way I flip my knives around and stuff, but I tend to kind of orient my knives in the way that feels right at the moment to use them for a task, and sometimes making a cut I find is easier for me in a reverse grip to reach certain spots, and that's just the way I use my hands in general. So I like reverse grip knives, but reverse grip with a kind of hawksbill blade, one that's swept in this direction, I find it's a little bit harder for me to track kind of where the tip and the edge are if I'm using it for actual like EDC stuff. I will say, if I was in a defensive situation, this feels pretty good. I probably look like an idiot doing all this kind of stuff here, but it's just what my brain tells me to do when I have a karambit in hand. For regular cutting, opening up boxes, stuff like that, reverse grip doesn't help me so much on this knife, not nearly as much as it does on a more traditional patterned knife. I can turn this knife around, and then I find if I put my pinky in this hole, I hate it even more than when my pointer finger's in it. So I just kind of choke all my fingers, come on, focus, up to here, and then I'm clearing the edge, which is fine. And then I've got this, frankly, rather small hawksbill blade here, which I found was quite effective. I like the kind of precision of the tip that I've got here. It's a chisel ground blade, so it's interesting. It's all flat over here, and then the grind is just on the right side. So for right-handed use, it's on the correct side. And I found that making normal EDC cuts with this blade like this, it was fine. It worked well. I think a lot of people who haven't tried a hawksbill blade probably should. It's one of those blade shapes that I hadn't really given a fair chance to until relatively recently, and I'm finding more and more with each one that I try out that I like the blade shape for EDC cutting tasks. It feels good to me to cut with a hawksbill blade. So it's okay like this. The Ergos are still fine, not great, but fine, and it works in that way. But again, compared to a regular, more EDC focused knife, whereas this is far more tactically focused, I don't find that it has more utility. In fact, it probably has less. Most of the knives I would carry as a primary or a secondary for regular cutting tasks. But it's passable. If this is the knife that's in your pocket and you've got to open some boxes and process some cardboard and cut some zip ties and cut some paracord, all that stuff, you'll be fine. It'll get that cutting job done. It is in D2 blade steel, which if I'm being honest, I don't really like D2 blade steel. It's acceptable to me on certain price points of knives. Like I have the Civivi Elementum, which I'll be reviewing very soon, in D2. That knife was $50. This knife is like $200. And I get that there's a lot happening here. This is a very unique design, and the construction is not a normal knife, and there's a lot happening here. But in general, have a little bit of a tough time swallowing the idea of D2 on a $200 piece. So, does it ruin the knife? No, but it would be cool to see something a little bit more advanced, in my opinion, at that price point. So I guess the only thing I haven't talked about yet is action. And this may kind of be the knife's saving grace for a lot of people. And for me, if I was going to own one, it would be for the action. It's just very fun to do that. And I find sometimes knives that have a really unique action can be fun for a little bit, but they end up being a little bit gimmicky, and it wears off pretty quickly. This hasn't worn off. Every time that I pull this knife out and I deploy it, it's a lot of fun. Now, closing the knife is not ideal. It has this little tab right there, and the way you close it is you pull this tab. It kind of pivots, if you see that, it pivots upwards, and then that allows this to then travel, and it locks back. So when the knife is closed, you can't even see that spot that you're using to open it, or close it back up, I should say. So yeah, it's really just that little pivot point allows you to do it. It's a little bit cumbersome to get to, and it's not like comfortable to do over and over and over, but it is comfortable over and over and over to do that. So it's a catch-22. It's very fun to deploy, not very fun to retract. But I do find that when I'm sitting on the couch and I have this knife next to me and I'm watching something, it's fun to just sit and play with and twirl around a little bit, and all of that is cool. Here I'm going again with my Doug Marcaida simulated moves that I don't know anything about. Yeah, so the action's a lot of fun. It actually is, the best way I can put it, it actually is as fun as it looked to me seeing other people do it in videos before experiencing it in hand. It really is that fun to me. And sometimes you get a knife in person and it's like, oh, that looked a lot cooler in pictures and videos, and then now it's here and it's kind of lackluster. This feels and sounds fun and cool. So there you have that. I guess that's kind of really going to be it on this knife for me. It failed the carry challenge. I don't find that this makes me want to carry karambits. Granted, this is a very different karambit, like I said, so I may, somewhere down the line, try a more traditional folding karambit, or maybe a fixed blade karambit of some sort. I'm open still to finding a karambit style knife that I do like, but the way this one sits in pocket, the way it went, I didn't find myself wanting to carry it. It's a pretty good indicator that for me it doesn't carry well. Beyond that, just reviewing the knife, I'll reiterate real quick. Carry, not so good. Ergos, kind of passable, but the ring, for my finger, not so good. The cutting, for what it is, good, but compared to most, if not pretty much all, of my more EDC knives that aren't designed to be crazy tactical, I would say it's subpar compared to those. But for being a tactical knife that is so focused on its purpose, I find that it did do okay at cutting. And then the action is a lot of fun, but closing it, not as fun. And I guess you can kind of take all of that for what it's worth. Like I said at the very beginning, this is not a knife that I see myself purchasing. I don't plan to go out and find one of these and own it. I feel like even if I found a pretty good deal on one, now that I've experienced it, the only thing that would make me at all tempted is to do this on my couch some more. But I don't. There's a lot of other fun knives out there. That's what I'll say. So there you have it. That'll be my full review of the CRKT Provoke, which was loaned to me again by DTOM Knives and Gear, who will be linked down below. Thanks, Kyle. I appreciate it, buddy. And thank you guys for watching. This has been a different one, for sure. So, thanks. I'll see you on the next one.